Hello, everyone. This is Dave Paulsen, head coach at George Mason men's basketball for episode 6 of our Distancing Dialogues. Today, lucky to have Jonathan Tsipis, head women's basketball coach, University of Wisconsin in the Big Ten Conference. Sip, great to have you on the show.
Well, I appreciate it, Dave, and I think it's great you're giving this back to help fill the basketball void, and obviously have Patriot Nation be able to tune in as well. So after spending 4 years on the other side of the revolutionary rivalry, it's nice to be able to hook up and look forward to talking with you.
Well, great. So just a little background first on what we're about here. For those of you maybe who've never watched, my attempt to do these dialogues that we normally would do just over the phone with former assistants of mine, to try to fill the void basketball-wise, but also to try to give back. And so every episode, I donate to a cause and ask my guests to do the same. And then we just ask whoever watches this, if there was anything of value in it, think about giving to some organization. Right now, with all that's going on in our country, people need the help. And so this week, going back to donating to DC Central Kitchen organization in the greater Washington, D.C. area. They've served over 500,000 meals during this pandemic to people in need. Just a great, well-run organization. Does a lot of training to help people get back and get positions as cooks and chefs and things like that as well. And Sip, you got a group that you're going to give to?
Yeah, we have a group called the Friends of State Street Family.org that helps homeless people in Madison, but also during COVID-19 and with the businesses that are on State Street, which is such a vital part of downtown Madison. It's actually the link between the Capitol District and our campus. So they do a great job of revitalizing State Street, but also helping those in need with not only meals, as you talked about, and at the DC Kitchen, but also teaching them skills to make them be able to be employable. And usually it kind of circles back to getting jobs for the different businesses that are on State Street.
Well, that's great. That's great. So just a little background. Everyone, my wife asked me the other day, does everyone have to have a nickname that you have? And I'm like, it just kind of worked that way. So Sip was an assistant for me 24, 25 years ago at Moyne College. And so spent a couple years as the volunteer assistant, I believe, at Cornell. Decided he wanted that whopping pay raise to get up to $4,000 or $5,000 that we were paying at Moyne. Spent a year there, went down to Elon as a director of operations, went to UNC Greensboro, again on the men's side, as director of operations, and then transitioned over to the women's side. Had that chance to work with Muffet McGraw at Notre Dame for 9 years. Very, very successful tenure there at Notre Dame. Then, as Jonathan said, came to GW as a head women's coach. Remarkably successful for 4 years at GW on the women's side, and has now completed his 4th year at Wisconsin in the Big Ten. So before we kind of get into the screen sharing and the X's and O's part, just a couple questions, Sip. Going from the men's side as an assistant, as an operations person, to the women's side, what was that adjustment like? I think there's, it just so happens that most of the guys I have on this show have stayed on the men's side. So what was that change like for you?
Well, I think, DP, first of all, I came to Moyne because of the free dorm room, so I could live back my college experience there, and then become the freshman dorm manager. That's a situation I'll never forget. But it's really interesting. The best way I can categorize it, and obviously, one of my greatest memories of watching somebody is I became in the Notre Dame involved in that situation while you were making your run at Williams, and was actually with Sean McDonald, and we were in Salem when you guys won the national championship, and that's when it started coming to, it was percolating a little bit and came to fruition that I ended up, the best way I can put it was when I was at North Carolina, Greensboro, we had a young man who was going to start for us as a junior. He'd started one game in 2 years on two good teams, an NCAA tournament team and a NIT team. And he spent 2 months debating whether to go to the NBA, to put his paperwork in to go to the NBA draft. And, dealing with that and just obviously like an amazing, from an ego standpoint, I get to Notre Dame and, one of the people I'm kind of charged with as being somebody who would oversee the perimeter players is a player who, as a freshman, she's the National Freshman of the Year from right in South Bend, Jacqueline Batiste. As a sophomore, she makes second team All Big East, but really struggles in the NCAA tournament, goes 6 for 45 from the field. It took me a year to convince her that she was a really good player. And honestly, she had a great game at UConn. That probably did more convincing than anything, but I think that difference, even a lot of the best players in women's college basketball, I was lucky because obviously Muffet was really, really good at it. Mike Bray on the men's side there, I think is a really good resource, and he's great at. He likes to say his number one job is to be a confidence giver, and I think that to me. I started to see that in my first year, and then we were fortunate enough to welcome a daughter into the world, and seeing that, I think it's become even more impactful to me because I every year my two kids have 15 older sisters that that are doing things that my kids are looking up to, and obviously being at a place like Notre Dame, they were when I got there, they were 2 years removed from winning the national championship, and Coach McGraw recently retired, did such an amazing job, and obviously to have that chance to build the program back up where, in those last 2 years, we're able to get to the national championship game in 2011 and 2012. But I've really enjoyed it. I've taken a lot of things I learned at Lemoyne. Basketball, I think in some ways is basketball from the X's and O's. I don't think that's a change. Where I do think is it definitely you have to constantly be a confidence builder, a confidence giver, and the game it's more. It has to be, as much as it's continuing to improve. I still think it's even more of a team-based game than even on the men's side.
That's great. Talk about what made Coach McGraw great. Great coaching anywhere. Obviously, she'll go down as one of the best people to coach college basketball, men or women, anywhere. What made her great?
I think first and foremost, she understood who she was, and she was somebody that never, to me, you knew it was never in the gray area. You always knew where you stood as an assistant coach, as a player, and I think she learned how to adapt. And when before I was there, they won a national championship with the best post player in the country, and they ran the triangle offense, which obviously we've gotten to see how great that is with the Last Dance over the last couple of months, and playing a 2-3 zone. And when I was there, the personnel changed. We never had that just kind of low block, deep post player like Ruth Riley, and she went from learning from Tex Winter to going to see Bill Carmody at Northwestern and instituting the Princeton offense, and played a lot more man-to-man and had really good perimeter players. Not to say our posts weren't good. They were just different type of posts. And I think she just, for somebody that's done it well at a high level, she understood how she needed to change. We needed to change how we played. And then always, I think, as a confidence giver, you can see she's really, with Coach Summit's passing, has taken that torch as I think the number one women's coach in the country, and empowering women, to be the best selves and to not settle. And obviously, whether that's in professional basketball, whether that's in education, whether that's in the working world. It's funny, I think personality-wise, and I can remember having a conversation with you on what you look for in assistants. And I remember you talking about you wanted somebody at Lemoyne who was inspired to go be a Division I assistant, and maybe somebody that wanted to be a Division III head coach. And that was something I think she understood. She was never going to be the super kind of warm and fuzzy. She's an introvert by nature. So she needed, extroverts that talked with their hands and, had that to be able to kind of round out her staff. And, I think that's one thing. It's, she's not been somebody that said this is the way we have to play. She just was a continual learner is probably the best phrase. And I love that because we were always challenged and whether it was to go watch, another college practice, go see a WNBA or an NBA team. I can remember the first time we met is when you and Coach Sheehy came up to Cornell and watched a practice. And, we went out on fine dining and went to Friendly's for breakfast
Absolutely.
early morning practice. But I think just seeing her do that and then seeing, where her players have been successful after they've left Notre Dame is obviously the lasting impact that she's had.
That's great. What a great tribute to her and loss for the women's game for sure with her retirement. So you, after 9 years at Notre Dame, you get the head job at GW. Talk about that transition from being the assistant with all the answers to the head coach with all the problems. What was that transition like for you, going from assistant to head coach?
Yeah, I was really fortunate because, in my first 2 years at Notre Dame, I worked under two assistants, one that had played for Coach McGraw, Coquise Washington, who ended up being very successful at Penn State and is actually kind of full circle, is back as an assistant at Notre Dame on their new staff. And Carol Owens, who left after my first 2 years and went to Northern Illinois, her alma mater, and became a head coach. And so, my role was to do a lot of player development. But each year, when Carol went to Northern, Coquise moved up, I added more responsibilities and started getting more into the recruiting side. And then after 4 years, or my fourth year, Coquise went to Penn State, and so I became the top assistant. And I think Coach McGraw did a great job of preparing you to be a head coach. I think, DP, one of the things I think probably a lot of your assistants will say is the one thing you can't prepare for is just that type of, you do have all the answers when you're an assistant. You think you know everything, and great bosses like yourself put you in a position to make some of those decisions. I think making that transition as a head coach is just now every decision, whether you made it or not, is on your shoulders for your program. And I think that's the one area I never understood on a game day. Coach McGraw would never come in. And Notre Dame was a little bit different. We didn't have a set shoot-around time. We're at home. Kids would come in and get shots up or watch film and everything. And we did a walk through an hour and a half before the game. But she always said, Sip, I've got to be my best from 7 to 9 tonight. And I know that if I'm in there all day, it's going to drain me as an introvert. And so that definitely, I think as an assistant, you're like, oh, game day, you get stuff done in the morning, shoot with your kids, be able to get more things. I started seeing that was one of those things you had to be there. You had to be in that position. But, I was fortunate because Joe McEwen had such a good run at GW. You walk in the Smith Center, you can feel the tradition, the teams they've had on the men's side that have been good, obviously the women's side. And we were really lucky. I was able to bring 3 people from Notre Dame with me, one as an assistant and 2 in the administrative spots. And so to instill that culture, we had people that kind of knew where I was going with the next step. And we inherited a great group of young women who had been my first group was the last group that Coach McEwen had recruited. So that was a group that had seen teams going to the Sweet 16 and always being in the NCAA tournament. And, and so the first year we were a game away from going to the WNIT, and then we were fortunate recruiting to have a really good freshman class, 2 kids that were 4-year starters, 2 really good transfers. And that second year we, finished second in the league and went to the Sweet 16 of the WNIT. And that kind of lifted us. I think being in the postseason there, and you can talk about teams that it's hard to get to the NCAA tournament if they haven't had some taste. And then the last 2 years of winning both the regular season and the A-10 tournament championships, but it was outside the box. I'll admit, I grew up 25 miles south of Cleveland. I had never coached in a big city, lived in a big city. GW's campus obviously is an urban campus, but it was a great experience. I think that allowed me to grow. I had to learn I don't think I'll ever be the biggest city guy. But it was great, I think, for our family. It from what you can take advantage of in the DMV and all the history and everything. And we were really fortunate that we could. Coach McEwen was always following the program. I was just I don't get done the things that happened without GW, without the people. And obviously, I think that tradition that he had already set.
That's great. And now 4 years at Wisconsin, and we were talking before we kind of started recording, now starting to get some of the best players out of the state and really kind of building your own brand there at Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think both my kids were born in South Bend. So that was one thing. And, from growing up here in Wisconsin, there's just for us, there's a Midwestern part of our children. We like to say, you can take them out of the Midwest, but you can't take the Midwest out of them. And so when this opportunity presented itself, you just looked across the board. And obviously a lot started with Coach Alvarez when he came in from a football standpoint. But just seeing, the level that, Coach Ryan and obviously now Coach Gard on the men's side, the volleyball team just lost in the national championship game this past year. Football obviously has had an unbelievable 20-year bowl run. I just saw everything there. It's a great academic school. That's why, your brother's a professor here. But
it can't be that good if he's a professor.
Being back in the Midwest, I've been fortunate, to be at really good academic schools. And I think that's where I fit best with relation to the kind of kids and what you're recruiting to. That to me, why hadn't women's basketball been on that same consistency that the other sports have? Hockey's won 5 national championships. Women's hockey's won 6. So there's a lot of people to learn from as well. And we're starting to, Coach Ryan, have done such a good job of kids from Minnesota and kids from Wisconsin and Midwest kids. And I felt like that was a good match because, our best Notre Dame teams, we may have had a player from Kentucky or Florida or, Canadian, but that group was still Midwest kids. And that's what we've started to build. And we have a class with, another good kid from Wisconsin to go with 2 that we had last year, a couple kids from Illinois. We're able to have a couple of good players from Minneapolis. So I do think it's fun now because we've got groups that have younger kids that even though they're not seniors yet have played a lot as freshmen and sophomores. So I'm excited. It's been obviously for all of us a different way of going about business, but this first group just graduated that we inherited, and they're going on to do great things. And but I do feel like we've got a group now. We've got 2 juniors already verbally committed, and so it's building in the right direction. And I'm fortunate enough to have somebody that's actually coached be the athletic director, and so. Barry's, I think, been great from that perspective. And as you're trying to learn as you go further in this journey, that no 2 seasons are ever the same, DP. And, our season at Moyne is probably when I look back and we learned a lot from. I look at, things that maybe didn't go the way that we wanted, but saw how that impacted you at Williams. And I look back and say, hey, when you're going through things, I know I can always rely on giving you a call or a text and helping me with that.
That's great. All right, so now we'll go. You should be able to share your screen.
Yep.
And let's transition to your portion. You're going to talk a little bit about special situations.
I am. So let's see. Pull down here. So kind of looking at this, and again, we could spend 3 hours on this. I think, one of the things that I've learned throughout my coaching career is, is, preparation is so key, and organization, and how many things you can be able to have your team prepared for that you're doing on a daily basis that becomes second nature. And, when you and I were talking, there's so many good things. We're really fortunate in the women's game because now, it's been 5 years, but, we have a lot of the NBA and WNBA advancement rules in. And I think it's added excitement to our game. It obviously makes you have to prepare a little bit differently. But I think for whether you're a high school coach or a JV coach or all the way to the top level, I think looking at it and saying, what are you able to prepare for, different ideas. And I'm going to share a little bit. And I think like a lot of these dialogues you're doing, none of us invented this wheel. We've borrowed, we've stolen, we've reinvented. But just talking a little bit about some ideas on how we build our practice around kind of that competitive nature where a lot of these special situations, even if you haven't built them specifically in, organically grow in your practice. So, just different things as we talk about, as we build a practice plan, is how much you're trying to keep practices game-like. I think as much as you can make competitions, and I know when you and Tobin were talking about, how you guys do in the shooting situations and drills and giving trophies and making that a competitive nature, because I think in the game of basketball you're playing so many smaller games within the game that if you win a majority of those, you're probably going to end up on the front end of the score. So we try to do it with a culture of competition with consequences. So we actually, and this is something I think it's been really good to pass down, is on our practice plan every day. We have the numbers 1 through 6 written out, and all of them have kind of a different consequence for a losing team, whether it's a 2-person shooting drill, 3-on-3, 5-on-5 shell. We have a winner and a loser. We track it all. We keep it updated. But next to those numbers, we have a different fundamental consequence, and not just putting them on the line and having them run. So we actually invested, it cost about $12, these big giant foam dice. And when a team loses, they roll the dice, and whatever comes up 1 through 6. And what we're able to do is, 6 might be 6-spot layups. And for a minute, that losing team's doing, passing, catching, working on layups, and going hard with that. 1, for some reason, has always been our team's, no matter GW or at Wisconsin, least favorite. And it's just 32 seconds of, a down, back, half court and back ball handling. The point guards always jump in that, because I think you can never have your point guards working enough on their handle. So trying to do that. And you get to the point, the foam dice is good because you don't want the losers ever to be happy with losing, so they can kind of take a little of their aggression out, and they roll that, and then they line it up. And then again, how do you put your players, in pressure situations in practice, so when those special situations happen in a game, that it becomes second nature. It becomes like a under out of bounds play that happened in the first quarter. I think special situations, the other advantage that I think on the women's game that I think has helped our game is going from the 2 halves to the 4 quarters. It puts us in 2 additional time and score situations every game that we didn't have beforehand. So I think those are good. Obviously, when you're working with the shot clock and you're doing, you're trying to educate your team on, a 2-for-1 situation, or we'll talk about a little bit later. And on one of the areas, talking about taking fouls. And so, again, I think maintaining their composure. Hey, this is going to happen. It might happen 3 times in a game. It might not happen in a game, but understanding, maintaining their composure. I think execution when tired is really important. And, again, I think keeping a team, players engaged in your practice. You may have one team that's just getting their butts kicked and they've lost a couple things I think we do special situations at the end almost every day, and you have a chance too that a team might walk out of there getting a stop or scoring in that situation that continues. Again, like I talked about early, of kind of building confidence. So I don't think we can ever do enough as coaches of having our kids help them think the game. And a couple of the situations, I loaded them up because I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on things. And I think everybody will, everybody's obviously, when they watch on TV, it's a lot easier to be a coach when you're watching it than when you're on the sideline. And why doesn't that team foul when they're up 3 and there's 7 seconds left? And just the best teams that do it in the world, the NBA and the WNBA, they practice that. They understand. Those guys are engineered to do that. If you don't practice that, you're probably not going to be very good at it. And you're probably going to foul somebody, while they're shooting a 3, or heaven forbid, we won a game at GW when somebody fouled us shooting a 3, trying to be intentional, and ended up the kid made it. And we won by 1 because she made the free throw. So I think familiarity of what to run, when to run it, and probably even adding on to that of who to run it for, so that your team knows that type of confidence in that setting. And those are some of the things to kind of go over as we get to the next slide. And then just the confidence, having that confidence of, hey, you're up 1, you've got to get a stop. In our game, a team's going to advance it to the 28-foot line, of understanding what we're trying to do based on our late game defensive philosophy, maybe the scouting report, what they've run. That's where it's amazing, because that's the inside huddle things, I think, in the pro level are really fun for me to watch, because there's like 9 assistants and they all know what everybody's run. I spent 9 years at Notre Dame. I can tell you, in end-of-game situations, Muffet always ran something that we had practiced. She never drew something up on the fly. Some people are obviously great at it and want that, a sense of, the unexpected. They want to catch people off guard. She was really big on, we've run this, we know we know it works, the kids are confident in it, and the same thing on the defensive side. So, so this is obviously, I had like 9 slides of this, and I tried to just say, hey, let's talk about kind of 3 areas. And again, on this give back, one of the things, you and I joked, because I think early in your career, you know where I'm coming at now. Obviously, a yellow pad and a pen, and we did good to recycle a lot of those papers under the bench after games. But one thing I learned at Notre Dame, that an assistant who was at Penn State came, and she had Renee Portland was a highly successful coach for a long time. She had talked about every out-of-bounds play, every side out-of-bounds play that you have. Do you have them diagrammed on both sides of the floor? And so she had that in a stack, and as much as you might work on them in practice and everything, what if all of a sudden, you have an assistant who's asking where the ball's going out, so and everything. But I thought that was a really good teaching tool for our kids. Like, if we go over one, you have somebody who's right-handed, you're probably going to go to the right side under the basket first. And so I thought that was just kind of a simple thing that especially if you're a JV or a high school coach, and you're not going to have 20 out-of-bounds plays probably, but can you run them effectively on both sides? Maybe you're a little bit limited. Maybe you have kids that you're running action to get the ball downhill off the first pass, and you don't want a kid going to his left hand. So, and I think that leads, so let me ask you this, Dave, when you're getting into your out-of-bounds play, what are some key things for you as you're talking to that person who's taking the ball out of bounds?
Well, it's amazing. So this is good, because we don't run a lot baseline out of bounds. We try to get it in and try to get a mismatch. And so this is good for me, because I've been doing a lot of the same stuff. I try to spend more time practicing the things that we do all the time. So we just have a couple of simple reads all out of the same alignment. We try to have the same alignment.
Yep.
And different reads and different people we want to attack based on who's hot, where the mismatch is, or if we think they're going to switch or not switch.
Sure. So one of the things I felt like, and obviously you're trying to get your team, all on the same page, right spots. And then obviously I would say 98% of people slap the ball to initiate an action. I got something, and this was, I don't even know when, it was at some point at Notre Dame. If you ever watch our teams at GW or Wisconsin play, whoever's inbounding it doesn't ever step out of bounds until they know everybody's in the right spot. And instead of going on the slap, our kids are programmed, and like you have to teach the inbounders. Like initially, like every kid in high school has just walked right out of bounds, grabbed the ball, slapped it without looking to see the kids are all in the right spots. So we do it a little differently. And again, if somebody's not watching this in scouting and I'm giving it away, so what? But as soon as our kid steps out of bounds and the ball is near the ref standing them the ball, our kids go. They don't wait for a slap, because I think it also indicates to the defense when everything's going to start. And that's just it's a small thing. It takes a little bit more time to get used to. But maybe it's, that split second of putting somebody in a position where, like you talked about, you're looking for a mismatch. Maybe they're in a situation where they weren't supposed to be switching, because it was a little on big screen. Then all of a sudden they do switch and you get a mismatch without them really kind of working on that. I think being specific of what do you have that you run to get a 2, to get a 3. I put that under 5 seconds, just knowing, that again, those situations can you work on. But I think trying to do that, and again, in the same situation, some of the best under out of bounds plays aren't all that complex. It's there's always some type of screen the screener action to put people in situations where they have to figure it out defensively. What side of the floor, I asked that because, again, like you said, if you're getting a mismatch or, the team's at 16 fouls and you're trying to get to the line, you're at 14 fouls, but the other team's on an 8-0 run, and, you can get that foul to help stymie that run a little bit. So I think what you asked, like we always talk about in those special situations, where's that person guarding? Are they up on the ball? Are they, if they're up on the ball, can you get some action then where maybe the lane opens up a little bit? More teams obviously play somebody in the lane to try to prevent getting something in the paint, any touch in the paint. Are you doing something where you can take advantage of that? Screen in for that inbounder, put that inbounder in a position where their man can't help. Like you talked about, teams might not be switching under out of bounds, and then, late game situations, they do. And understanding that. And like you said, the mismatch right away. Are you trying to go after somebody specific that you've seen on film, either is just a bad defender or maybe just isn't a bad defender but is bad in under out of bounds situations? So I think those are all just questions to be able to talk about with your staff that help teach the game a little bit more. And kind of when we get through this play, we have something that we bring to practice every day that helps us put those situations in play. So I think side out of bounds have become much more crucial in the women's game just because of the advancement rule. And so how you're guarding them, what side you're taking it on. It's funny, the first 2 years, you could only take it on the bench side. And now, obviously at Mason, if you guys are if I'm facing the scoreboard, I'm trying to do my research. I know at Mason, you guys, you're the bench to the left of the scorer's table if I'm facing it, and the visitors are to the right. And I know we wanted it changed to be able to go both the bench side or opposite, because at GW we were opposite. So we were on the if you looked at the scorer's table, we were on the right side. Yep. Well, if I always have it on the bench action, and I really wanted to run stuff that was right in front of us and getting downhill, it was going to have to be with the kid's left hand. And, we talked about, like, if we could have both sides, which obviously is what the NBA and the WNBA does, that maybe if you're trying to get something to a kid who's right-handed in a downhill drive, you could run it from the other side of the floor where they caught the ball with a shorter space and be able to attack downhill. So I was really fortunate, after I was at Lemoyne and at Elon for a couple of years to work for Fran McCaffrey at UNCG, who's at Iowa now. And he was adamant then, when you call a timeout, you brought it right to the 28-foot, the old school, coach's box line. So the kids were familiar with the inbounder, knew that's where they were going to have the ball at and what to run from those spots, and spent a lot of time on that. And so I think, like anything, is you're trying to develop your own philosophy. You're trying to figure out how you can make your kids feel like they're going to be successful. And I think anytime we call a timeout, unless it's against the press, we're trying to get it to that spot. So when we get to the advancement situations, but I still have nightmares. We lost a game at Notre Dame. My daughter was about 7 weeks old. We were up 6 with 30 seconds left, and Michigan State, had a side out of bounds, and the debate of whether you put somebody on the ball or you have them back off, and the old adage, the inbounder can be the most dangerous person on the floor. And we lost and they threw it in, and somebody ran up and screened the inbounder's man, and they flared, and the kid banged a 3, and we missed a front end, and they hit a 3 at the buzzer to send it to overtime, and we lost. So I think I'm very cognizant on, like, a lot of our experiences, DP, of when you've lost or something hasn't gone the way, of trying to prevent that from ever happening again. So just a little bit, I'd be curious to hear from you, kind of side out of bounds, some of kind of your basic philosophies.
Those are great. So it's funny because your game is so different. So we don't have the advancement rule, and I never thought about the fact, I didn't even know what your rules were, that for 2 years it always had to be in front of the sideline. So yeah, you know what, we try to be as simplistic as we can be, where we try to stack 3 guys in front of the ball, and put the 5-man usually on the ball side block. And this is if you're in your offensive.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And just to be able to get it in and get into to whatever we're running offensively. And then, one of the things, Jimmy Patsos, when he was at Loyola, when I was in the Patriot League, they would always trap the side out of bounds. They do their little diamond press. So we would have sometimes the 5-man in the backcourt, and you'd always have an outlet to it. But so mine has always been more risk averse. Let's get it in safely.
Sure.
Because we don't have the advancement. And then we have some special situations when it's late game where we need to get a bucket from the side out. But there's good food for thought here.
Well, and we, a year ago, we looked like we were done for sure. Nebraska scored with 0.7 seconds left to go up 2, called timeout. It definitely changed the game of what you do from saving timeouts to make sure you have that action, and you've got to work on it. And like when it went in, we were lucky enough, obviously in that area, you've got the not that just because they're good, but they're accessible. The coaching staff from the Mystics is phenomenal. And we said, how do you, kids coming into the league, how do you teach them? Because, for advancement, it's easy when the free throw goes in, but when the ball, comes off the rim, like you can't pivot forward, right. You can't dribble, or you lose that advancement. So, we were down 2, and we're fortunate enough against Nebraska to have some screening action, to have a kid catch it in the corner and bang a 3 to win the game. And like, it just, to me, it's great for our game, not just because we won the game, but just, it's, you got to, in the Kohl Center, we got 7,000 people going nuts and everything. And, but we make sure and have something we had in, where it put them in a situation and they put somebody with a lot of length on the ball, which put somebody smaller, ended up matching up with our kid coming off the screening actions in the corner. And you know what? I'm just amazed she got the shot off. And, but it definitely, like you said, I think some of those good questions are, if you're not trying to score off of it, what's that safety? Like you talked about against, Coach Patso's team and trapping, and he wasn't when he guarded Steph Curry with 2 players the entire game.
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah, but having that, because again, there are certain times, if you've got a couple turnovers in a row, you've got to, hey, just getting it in and getting in your offense, is the best case scenario. So, the next one, and how are we doing on time, Dave? I want to make sure.
We're good. We're going to go about 25 more minutes.
Okay. So let me go back here. So I think one of the debates that every coaches have is what's your philosophy up 3 points, and obviously in the highest levels in the world, the WNBA and the NBA, they don't let teams get shots off if they can, especially if they're coming the length. Obviously they advance, and asking, do you foul? And I think always that next question is then, do you work on it? Do you talk about to your kids, who's going to do it, where they're going to do it on the floor, when they're going to do it? Like if a kid catches the ball and he or she's got their back to the basket at 30 feet, like, are you just going to reach in there? Or are you going to wait till, can you get a couple more seconds off the clock? And I just think obviously the NBA and WNBA, they teach it from training camp to their rookies, just like the advancement. Like the Mystics said on that advancement, they have to work on shooting a missed free throw and having kids get it and just chin it and not move it. And, and obviously in the men's game has different timeouts, as far as like in our game, I can always call it. I know when it's live in play, your players have to call it, right, Dave?
Yep.
You don't have
I think
that
they might
ability.
change that back. They might change that back.
Except
for in the last 2 minutes. Then we can call it.
In the last 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I can remember our right when I was getting the Wisconsin job in the Sweet 16, Coach Guard's first year, they beat, Xavier on that crazy Bronson Koenig shot from the corner. And then they're playing Notre Dame. Ironically enough, they're playing Notre Dame in the Sweet 16. And, they've got the lead. The ball gets inbounded. Notre Dame's got heavy pressure on the ball. And Greg wanted to call a timeout just to calm them down. And one of the players got stripped, and it went from, up one to down one. And all of a sudden they're a little bit rattled. They end up losing that game. And, just looking and saying that's a situation that then they couldn't call it. And so that's obviously changed in the last couple of years. But again, I think every person who watches games at home starts screaming, at Notre Dame, Muffet was never a want to foul. She was like, our defense needs to be good enough to try to get a stop. And if worst case scenario, they make a guarded three. And I almost felt like my philosophy changed because, we were in the second to last regular season game at Richmond when I was at GW, and we're up 3. And like, should we foul here? And they kept running the same action, and it put our 6'6" kid on their point guard. And I felt like she could have good length. And the kid made a 30-footer with her shoulders facing the scoreboard or scorer's table to send it into overtime over the 6'6" kid. And I'm like the kid makes that 1 out of 50 times. But, we talked about it, and I probably think that next week in practice we won in overtime, luckily enough. And it clinched us a share for the regular season. But we worked on it. You go back and saying, do you have that option, how to do it? So, and then something with us being on quarters, that presents itself in a time and score is having fouls to give. So we're on the NBA, WNBA, where it's 5 fouls per quarter. On the 5th, you go to 2 shots. Again, the quarter situation, the advancements, I think has really helped our game. This is probably the one area at the end of games that the strategy of 1-and-1 is out the window. And I think that's changed. I think, when you're at Williams, you're a great free throw shooter, so it affected you. Like, does it affect a free throw shooter who's, shooting 60% or 55%? I think they have more confidence when they know they've got 2 shots. Good free throw shooters, when they know they've got to make it to get that second one, you've got more of that on there. So I've actually kind of built these cards for today so you could see them. But just we had a kid on our team that was her role, and she could come in and be able to take fouls and understood, like, if a team's trying to get the last shot and they're holding the ball, when to take it, and understanding, you've got to work on it. We got, somebody scouted in our league us really well and knew that's a tendency we had if we had fouls to give. And we took one, they took it back out of bounds, and the kid caught it, and our kid reached while the kid had squared, and the kid let it fly from about 27 feet, and they called the kid got 3 shots. So I think that's, again, getting to games, being able to take fouls, that might be a way that, at the end of a game, if you've got a couple to we talk about it being a game-winning play that might happen at the end of the first quarter to steal a possession. So those are just some examples, so this. So
do you foul up 3 now or no?
We work on it. But
you don't do the same thing all the time.
No. So we definitely, based on what we've seen, with the advancement of understanding, we have certain hot zone areas that we'll foul in. If they some teams will want to throw it inside and then, point screen or do different actions to go inside out to try to get the 3. So we'll actually, our kids are programmed to, if the ball goes inside, especially because usually the kids got their back to the basket because they're distributing, like we work on how to take that foul, so they've got to take it out again. And then obviously if they catch it, past the 28-foot line, if they catch it going away from the basket, can we get that in before they get their shoulders squared up? So they could, obviously we don't want to foul there, because then all of a sudden, somebody puts their hands in and they fake that action and they're able to get 3 free throws out of it. So, so these are, this is something, and we've tried to share this. We have about 25 different scenarios on these situation cards that we use, and so to help kind of with situations, it goes through, everything's pretty much a 20-second or less, so the shot clock's off, but just time and score, and it's got every situation. And if I can do this right here, so like, it talks, you have, let me change the pen here to red.
A little more high-tech qualified than me. So
yeah, so like here's your situation.
Yep.
And then the different areas, like what, do you have possession of the ball? Which team has possession if there's a jump ball? Where are you at in the team foul? So I made this specific for the men's game, because obviously we're on the, with ours, we have ones that say you've got 3 or 4, so if you've got one to give. This is, White has the ball, but then who's got the error? That might dictate something you do. And so number of timeouts you've got. So we've got all these different cards that we try to look at 2 or 3, have 2 or 3 ready for a practice, have it set up, and then play the situation out. And, this is one where, the white team is going to has 1 free throw left. So obviously on the make, they're going to foul. Can they get a quick steal? They foul right away. A little different in your game. Like you don't have that advantage to maybe go for the quick steal because you don't have the advancement if you get it back. Right. But so we have those. And I think, we've got them in an Excel sheet. We have ones, that have Air Force's logo. So we got them from there. you put your own logo on them. It's got you laminate them, you put a little ring binder. It's not all that costly, but I think it's been really good for the kids to learn the game in that way. And so I have this one, DP, that I wanted to kind of one specific scenario right here. White shooting a 1-and-1 coming out of a timeout. So obviously going in the timeout, if you're coaching the white team, what are you telling them right now? Obviously it's a 1-and-1. You could have a tie game with 8 seconds left and the other team doesn't have a timeout. So how are you going to guard them? Just curious. I thought this would, I thought Patriot Nation would, sorry. Not going to that yet.
All right, so I'm the white team coach.
You're the white team coach.
I have no timeouts. I have no timeouts left.
Right.
Okay. And I got my guy shooting a 1-and-1.
Got your guy shooting a 1-and-1. You don't have the arrow. But you also know going in, the red team doesn't have a timeout.
Right. Okay.
So I thought this is a good one you could talk about. Hey, this is, if all those scenarios you'd go through in a timeout.
Yeah.
With your team.
This is good. So obviously the first thing is, hey, Johnny's going to make both free throws. All right. Yep. When Johnny makes both free throws, what are we in defensively? And, we don't have a foul to give. Whatever we're picking up, whatever defense we've been playing, hopefully a little token pressure, and hopefully my guy who had the scout, like, Coach, this is their go-to play on the way back. And then we would say if for some reason Johnny misses, since it's a 1-and-1 and not a 2-shot foul, so there's no way that we make the first and miss the second and they take it. There's no way that they're taking it out of bounds unless we're tied. So if Johnny misses one of them, we're going to foul on the rebound. Like number one, we're going to get the rebound. Like, do your job, get the offensive rebound. But if for some reason they get the rebound, we're fouling on the rebound. We got a box out, and here's what we're running: home run, we're running triple, we're running center field, whatever it is. In this scenario, we would have time to really advance. We'd have time if all that played out. If we've worked on this for sure, the other team would be shooting free throws with 7.5 seconds or something like that on the clock. So we would have ample time. And then in there, you'd have to talk about if they make their free throws, what do we got? And if they miss them, we're advancing off the miss. So there's a lot to cover in a timeout. And this would be, to be honest with you, if I ran out of time, where I'd probably ask the assistant coach to make sure that to the ref to check how much time, if they got the clock right and how much time's left. We think there should be 8.9 seconds just to frickin' stall so that we can get more time in our huddle.
Would this be a situation, Dave, where you'd have somebody, instead of having them, if you're changing your lineup, because obviously you're building a defense because you're expecting the kid to make both, but no matter what, you're either in a tie game with your best defensive team on there, or you're trying to load it up that if the kid misses the first or misses the second after making one, to be able to foul, where you're sending somebody to the scorer's table maybe to stop the action.
When the guy, yeah. So again, that would just depend on, is our best defensive lineup also our best offensive rebounding lineup, and is nobody in foul trouble? So obviously those situations would dictate. I could see a scenario where, we would sub for a potential offensive rebounder who could also then give a foul, and then we could sub back again. Sure. So a lot just depends. Sometimes, but with no timeouts left, you want to make sure that you got your best potential scoring coming back.
Sure.
And then I think the biggest thing is to reiterate. we're tied, we're locking down, we're getting a stop, we're winning this thing in overtime.
Right.
But as you say, you can practice all the situations of the world, and sometimes you can do it all wrong and have the result turn out good.
Yep.
And vice versa. This is good. I like this.
So it's I think good, and these are the type of discussions I think that you grow as a coach to look at it and say, and I look the sub as in, to me, like if they're they've been blowing the ball up the floor. Like, I just can't rely on, like, telling my kid, like, hey, square them up, make them go east-west. Like, we're gonna stop. Like, we're gonna get that kid in. And again, maybe you are taking a little bit away from what you're gonna do on the offensive end coming back. But somebody has a great guard. You don't want them doing Tyus Edney on you, and weaving all the way up. And then if you set it too, are you in a situation where whoever's guarding the inbounders, man, you start doing a little bit of, you talked about token pressure. Do you do a little bit where you plug the gap and you make that guard have to handle it against two with the inbounders defender, and again, because a lot of times if teams are running quick action, that person's maybe not as involved. Villanova's a great example of winning a national championship, and that inbounder was the most dangerous person on the floor. Because when they got in the lane and turned and kicked back, that was the inbounder coming to knock that down, and his kid was too late because he plugged too late. He helped inside the 3-point line. So, and
I would agree with Muffet on that in terms of like what we're doing. So this past year we did more 3/4 court and full court pressure than we have previously at Mason. So then I would be potentially feel good about going 3/4 court pressure because it's something we practice. But I certainly wouldn't do anything. I would agree with Muffet. I would not do anything defensively that isn't part of our arsenal. Because I think when you're in a pressure situation, kids have to feel a comfort level. Obviously, this is the whole premise of all the practice that you do with your team. So doing something on the fly that isn't part of your arsenal, I think, invites disaster.
Yeah.
Now, certainly it could be something that you've practiced a lot that you don't do the other 39 minutes. But, hey, this is our end of game stuff. Because I was just thinking about, for me, we don't go to the nuance in terms of fouling that we're like, if it's under 7 seconds, the first dribble or the first catch after half court, we're fouling. And we're reaching in, and we do not give that person, under penalty of the most extreme punishment, the chance to turn and get into a shooting motion. And we do practice that a lot. And there's no gray area. Like, for me, we're going to foul, we're not going to foul. And I debated, I went back and forth, and then I just looked at the numbers. I'm like, if it's under 7 seconds, we got to foul. Now, you can still lose a game that way.
Sure.
Because the guy can make 2 free throws, foul you on the inbound. Your guy goes down, misses the front end of the 1-on-1. Now they're down 1. They race it up. I mean, you can lose anyway. You can win anyway.
Yeah.
But I think the odds over the course of the people who've really traced these, and people have done whatever you call it, a diagram tree or whatever it is, like all the different routes. The guy, Bill Fenlon from DePaul, men's coach, he did a whole decision-making tree, and the data was at least compelling enough. Like, yeah, I think you're probably better off fouling.
Yeah.
But interesting.
Well, and like this scenario, like I put it on here because I know this would be something you could encounter a lot more. We probably don't encounter this very much because so much has gone to
advance.
You're usually saving probably 3, maybe at least 2 for that last minute. And so, understanding like we're going to spend more time on guarding an advancement, guarding on both sides, being able to do that just because we don't face this as much. But again, you got to make sure like we could be in that situation where we've had to use 2 to advance, and whether we were successful or unsuccessful to score, all of a sudden maybe we're out of timeouts in this situation. situation, and we got to make sure what we want to understand going, moving the ball up the floor. And I think the possession arrow one is something that's kind of underutilized because, understanding defensively, I think if you're behind and, your kids, because you press more, we're used to trapping and understanding like, hey, I'm going to try to put my hands on the ball if we've got the possession, because as opposed to just committing a quick foul. We were fortunate enough, 2 years ago in a game in overtime where we were down one, missed the shot, they advanced it, they inbounded it, and we said, there was maybe 12 seconds left, and we said we are going to trap like crazy for the first 5 seconds because we still had a timeout and try to get a jump. Just put your hands in anywhere you can, and we were fortunate enough we got it. Then we get the ball, we can advance it off of that, and a kid made a play for us. But it is something as you talk to different coaches on. Understanding in that, in those last couple minutes of your philosophy can change whether you have the arrow or not.
Yeah, that's great. And so you have how many of these cards?
So we've got, I want to say there's 20 to 25 different scenarios.
And you'll try to do one.
We've done two, and maybe it's a little bit of a play. We've actually taken the scenarios for team camp. And at the end of every game at team camp, we have a Ziploc bag that's got just maybe 5 or 6 of the scenarios in a bag, and the winning team coach pulls it out, and it'll just, instead of red and white, it'll just say, winning team is team A, losing team is team B, and they'll play something at the end of team camp games. And the same reason we feel like it helped our practices, is all of a sudden you're at team camp and the kids, you got them there. All of a sudden now they're working on those same things. And maybe it's something that, a team loses, a game and gets drilled or loses by one. They're right back out there. They're in a scenario and something, maybe you got those high school coaches. It leads to really good dialogue like we're having right now. And we do that after every game. It's not time consuming because everything's under 30 seconds. And so we took them from these cards, just made them smaller so they could read them. And we have the teams do that. So
I love that.
We've got them built for our game, which obviously we've got them built for high school, which is obvious in depending the part of country you're at. Wisconsin's on 18-minute halves for the girls. Okay. So we have those. And again, it's easy. Two scenarios fit on each sheet. So, you can get them laminated and you get 12 pages laminated. You cut them, you punch a hole in them. And I'll take it off the screen share so you can see. I'll take this off too real quick. We've got them right here. So we've got, the cards right here. This one's got the giant hook. Want the smaller hook version. We got that. We bring them to every practice. And all of a sudden, if we want, if something happens in a game and you're scrimmaging and it's, 1-point game, you can add the different things, but then you just flip them through. And if we take them, if we do something in a practice, usually I take those 2 cards out so we don't use them the rest of the week. But we carry them around. And like I said, we got them from Air Force, and so we just take the logo off, put the Patriot on or put, you got your George Mason men's basketball logo and ends up being good stuff. I love
it. So we're going to ask a few more follow-up questions on that, and we're not going to get to zone offense.
Okay.
Then we might have to have you come back.
All right.
Because to me, again, and truthfully, I find this to be a great value. And if hopefully one other person watches and think it's good, and if the other people don't, who cares? But to me, this is an area and an aspect that people don't talk about enough. And this has really stimulated my thinking, which is the whole purpose. This is what we would be doing normally, just via the phone, and me being aware of what Zoom is now. And this is something good has come out of the horrible pandemic. So 2 questions. Do you do these? You do 2 of these a day? Do you do them always at the end of practice, or you do them right at the end of like a competitive part of practice, like you were talking about?
Yeah, so sometimes it builds itself in. So, we do a drill, and I'm not sure this. We may have gotten this from when we were together at Moyne from you, but we call it Carolina break, where it's 2-on-1, 3-on-2, progressive break.
Carolina numbers, yep.
So we get to the end, and what we've done is when it gets to 5-on-5. We'll let each group go twice. And when it gets to 5 and we get it down, and we put a minute up. So, you're keeping score, red versus white for us. Each group's gotten one person to shoot a free throw to initiate. Okay. And then you do the progression. When it stops, we see what the score is. If
each group goes 5-on-5 twice.
To one possession. So, and we let the team that's winning, each team then picks 5 straight, so you don't have any more interchange. We put a minute up on the clock, and we play that like one of the situations. We put the fouls up, we have the possession arrow, and then we play that out. And so that's one area where we feel like when we do that drill, we're going to get some good late game situation action.
So you're saying you do the 5-on-4, then you come back 5-on-5, and once you're at 5-on-5, you're playing for. Then you start the clock with 1 minute. So we do
that. So if you can imagine, like, say the red team starts and you're shooting a free throw and I'm on white and my teammate's there. So we do that 4 times, 2 for each team. So they each get to work on the advantage situations 2 times. Once it ends on that 4th time you do it. And
2-on-1, 3-on-2, 4-on-3, 5-on-4.
Yeah, and then we go till 5-on-5.
5-on-5, one time.
Because if you go 5-on-5, it ends at the end where you can add the shooter.
Right. So now
bring the shooter down. So we do that, and we started at 5 minutes. And what we found is each one of those segments, if you're going at a good pace, you can usually get one segment in about a little bit in between a minute and a minute 15. And once we get it. Because again, if you do 2 for one group and 1 for the other, then they start complaining it's not equitable.
So you do. So if I go, okay, red's coming back 2-on-1.
Yep.
And then white's coming 3-on-2. Red's coming 4-on-3. White's coming 5-on-4. Red's coming 5-on-5. Stop there. Now you shoot the free throw, and that should make it that. Now the other. Now you're in the different advantage. That's one cycle.
That's one cycle. So we do 4 cycles.
2 each.
2 each, and then we see where the score is. And if we have now it might be down to 35 seconds left of the original 5 minutes you put up. What we do is we put it back to a minute. We have the score. Now, if it's with a minute and it's a 4-point game, we might give the losing team the ball. Down 4 with a minute, and they've got to play it like the last minute of the game.
Okay.
And so now they can't add people in. Everything stays 5-on-5. But it was a way we felt like if all of a sudden you're on the red team and you're crushing me, like you don't just leave it 26 to, not that they would score that, but
26 to 14. You're not going to leave it like that.
Yeah. So you make it into one of those situations, but we put a minute on. So then all of a sudden now we're in the advancement section.
Yeah.
Now you might be in a situation where you can work on some good 2-on-1 situations. And so it leads to a lot of good things. So that's a way without directly just going straight to the cards that we've built it into a practice setting.
I like that. I like that a lot.
And it was just something where we like the advantage break. And all of a sudden, if you're in an up and down game, obviously, like you've got to understand how important time and score and possession is and be able to do that after kind of trying to really dictate the tempo and attack to get the advantages in the numbered situations.
That's awesome. I love it. All right, Sip, I could go for 3 more hours. Unfortunately, I got another Zoom call.
Okay.
This has been over an hour. So first of all, your email. Can people email you for some of this
Sure.
stuff?
It's just my initials. J as in Jonathan, P as in Peter, and then T as in Tsipis. All right.
He is in Tomahawk or Tsipis. Yep.
So JPT at athletics, which is plural, .wisc, WISC.edu.
Perfect. This has been great. And we'll I'm gonna follow up with you offline here in 1 second. We're gonna stop the recording, and I think anyone watching this will know why Wisconsin is going to be at the top of the Big Ten in just a matter of time. So this has been great. Thanks, Seth.
Thanks for having me, Dave.